I'm all finished quilting my squares. Wouldn't this be a lovely, completely handmade quilt? Like the sentimental value of the quilt would be increased if I did all the joining seams by hand.
All right, I've got all my stickies pinned on and I've made sure that all my quilting lines are going in the same direction based on the orientation of my stickies. And then I've grouped my rows together with these clips and I'm ready to start joining my rows. So I'm gonna join a few by hand and then I'll see if that's gonna work for me or if I'm gonna be ending up on the machine. And I will show you guys my work. I just wanted to show everyone this great big cone of thread that my daughter found for me at the thrift store in her town, and the price, it really is a bargain. I mean, it's not as good quality as this, which is one of the ones I got from the yarn sale. And you know, the regular price on one of these is $7, or it was this summer. It's probably higher now. And I got it on sale for $5.75, and this was 50 cents. And I think there's probably about 3 or 4 times more thread on there. So I'm gonna start with this thread to join my rows, bargain basement, almost free quilt, and let's see how I do. I've joined rows 1 and rows 2, row 2, and I've joined the rows together. So I've so far done it by hand. The method I'm using is not my method. It's from a lady her channel is called Teresa Down Under, and I'll link the video below. Okay, so I've joined these two, and now I'm going to try and demonstrate joining the next one. So the first thing is to pin back the backing. So now my seam is only going to pick up the top layer. Oh, first I have to mark my seam. So I want a 1/4 inch seam. And here, you know, I went a little bit too far with my quilting, so I'm going to have to fudge it a little tiny bit. So I'm using my 1/4 inch seam guide here and my heat erasable pen to give me a seam guide. Okay, so I'm going to trim this batting a little bit really carefully so that I don't accidentally cut my quilting fabric. Now that leaves me plenty of room to sew. Okay, so double check my orientation, and now I'm going to clip my seam together. So for this first part of the seam, I just have to be really careful not to pick up this folded over piece of backing. Well, for the whole seam, I have to be careful, but I'm more vulnerable to it there. And my seam is going to start right, actually, maybe I'll sew from the other side because it'll be more visible and I'll be able to see what I'm doing. So I'm going to be picking up right from the very edge of the fabric. And one of the benefits of doing this by hand is I can feel with my finger that I'm not accidentally picking up the backing. Whereas on the machine, I would only have a line of sight on the top layer. And I find sometimes my machine, when I want it to do something fancy, it protests and it doesn't do such a great job. Okay. So one of the things I've found with this method is there's a lot of pins and a lot of clips, and I have been, you know, stabbed a few times by my pins. But as I'm going along, I'm getting a little bit more adept at it. For me, the jury is still out on this method, as opposed to the method that uses cover strips, but I wanted to try a quilt this way. The one good thing about it is that there's no extra fabric required. You're using seam allowances to join the quilt blocks. I think also too, the method as demonstrated by Teresa Down Under is all machine based with very flat batting and very neat sewing. So machine quilting is much flatter than hand quilting, and plus I've used my batting scraps on this quilt, so I don't have consistent thicknesses between my blocks, so that I think makes it a bit trickier to capture a flat seam allowance. But we'll see. It's going okay so far. I do like the increased amount of control I have sewing them by hand. These little tails I left are kind of bugging me. I think I left them to give my knot more life in my quilting thread, but man, they're bugging me as I'm joining my blocks. So I'm finished my row of back stitches to join my seams, and I'm going to put a second row of running stitch all the way back to the other end as a little bit of insurance that the seam is going to remain intact as the quilt is washed and used. Again, I'm feeling with my hands on this side to make sure I don't pick up my backing fabric for this seam. That's what it looks like on the front side after this first step. Now the next step, which is to join the backing fabric. I'm going to trim my seam allowance very carefully. I'm going to use this as my piece to fold over. So, okay, so what's your point, Dara? All right, so this needs folding over and pinning. So I'm going to hand sew this folded over part to the backing square on the other side, but I'm not going through all the thicknesses. I'm just sewing the backing piece to the backing piece on this adjacent square. I think even in Teresa's video, when she's demonstrating this method, this part is hand sewn in her video as well. I don't think there's a way for this method to machine sew this part. Well, I guess you could try. You just show on the other side, that's all. No rules. Gotta just do what feels good for you. Getting stabbed by that pin right there, but I'm not willing to lose that label yet. Don't trust myself. Okay, there's my back piece stitched on, and there's what it looks like at the front, and there's my first 3 squares joined together of row 3, making some progress. Okay, I'm getting ready to join my next block, and I just wanted to show about trimming the batting. So here I don't have my full 1/4 inch seam allowance, so I need to trim this batting a little bit. And I'm using this teeny tiny pair of scissors because they're nice and sharp, and I feel like I have more control because I don't want to nick my quilt fabric or my backing fabric. Although if I do, I can put a patch on there and keep going with my project. So I'm a little shy right there. I'll be fudging that when I do my joining seam. Okay, so I just finished sewing this, oops, I got a pin there, get over there. This seam together. I was aiming for these lines to line up, but I'm also kind of pleasantly surprised that they did line up. So, but for the overlap of the backing square, I have less to work with than I had with my quilt block that had the floral printing pattern or quilting pattern. So I've trimmed my inner, but I'm gonna trim this one, and I'm only picking it to go overlap from this side just because I have like a tiny bit more fabric to work with. Whoops, I'm gonna trim off this. I'm shooting for it to be a tiny bit longer than the inner quilt top squares, but I don't think it matters too much. I just want it to be able to tuck in the other side. So that's what I've trimmed off. Let's see how we do here. Okay, so it's tucking in without butting up against my last quilting stitch and knots. And so now I need to turn under a tiny seam allowance. That's about 1/8 of an inch, and pin it down before I sew it. Okay, so I flipped over to my wrong side, and now I need to pin my backing out of my way. Okay, my seams are marked and I'm ready to join up my row. So I can tell that I'm going the right way because of the diagonal pattern of the blocks, but also I have kept my labels on, and this is column A, B, C, etc., and A, B, C. So I'm feeling confident about matching things up. Just match my seams. I'm going to use clips for this. Okay, I have done my seam. Now I'm going to flip it and check it one more time. And I can see that I've got, that it's following my pattern, that things are, you know, diagonally across from each other, the blocks are. So now I'm going to do one more row of just a straight running stitch along here. Okay, so I am just going to keep going with that extra row of stitches. It is really just an insurance policy because I feel like, you know, hand stitching isn't always quite as sturdy as machine stitching, and I'd like this quilt to stick together for, you know, the foreseeable future. So I'm going to keep going with my second row of stitching off camera. I'm finished my second row of stitches, and I think you can kind of see them a bit better on this dark blue block. So now it's time to close up the backing. And one of the nice things I've found about joining the rows as opposed to the original joining the blocks into rows is I've got more room to fold over my backing, and I don't need to trim my seam allowance. So it's just a matter of folding it under. For my first few stitches, I've made sure to leave this fabric unattached to the front of the quilt because I'm planning to put a border, and I think I'm going to be using this same method to attach the border. So now it's a matter of sewing this folded edge down. And it doesn't show on the other side. I am trying to pick up the seam allowance underneath, but not the front of the block. And I'm just going by feel. Okay, so that's what that looks like. It's pretty invisible with the gray thread on the gray flannel, and the texture of the flannel also helps it stay invisible. Even if it shows, I think it's okay. It's a handmade piece, so, you know, hand stitching is nice to look at. So I'm going to keep going with this seam all the way across the side.